All of the capital expenditures that we're proposing to be paid for from our excess reserves. There's some other information in here on 117 and 118. That's where does the money come from? Where does the money go? Just want to point out to you on that is basically all of our funds. It shows you all the revenue, the use of reserves, and then it shows you all the operating expenses and all the capital expenses. So it looks like our budget for operating is $100 million budget. I just want to point out that there are duplications in that, and they're necessary duplications, but I don't want you to think that we have $100 million of money that necessarily comes in. Money does get transferred sometimes from one fund to another, so it's a duplication. A good example of that is our equipment replacement fund, our internal service funds. Each of the operating funds pays a depreciation charge to the equipment replacement fund. So to the equipment replacement fund, that's revenue. Then the equipment replacement fund goes out and buys the equipment, and they have an expense. But the general fund has a depreciation charge that becomes revenue to the equipment replacement fund. The same is true for our health insurance fund. The general fund, the water sewer fund, all the operating funds, they pay a health insurance premium for each of their employees. Well, then over in the health plan fund, we pay the actual claims for the employees. So there are duplications, and I just want to make sure you realize that $100 million is just simply a sum. So, yes.
On the depreciation, we've talked about this for several years, Gary, about possibly kicking that up to maybe 60% of the revenue. Have we given that more thought to try to increase that depreciation factor?
We have not been able, it's still at 55%, we've not been able to afford to increase that. But what we have been able to do, and y'all have allowed us to do this for a number of years, is use our car rental fund to supplement for those large pieces, and so we are still recommending doing that, and that keeps that equipment fund. And of course, Kyle extends the life of that equipment as long as he can, and so between the extension of the life and then the use of the car rental funds to basically backfill any shortfall on the larger pieces, we've been able to keep that for many years without having a problem.
Now, we still have some equipment that's not covered, don't we?
I believe it's all on there now. You all have mandated
Even
a
the
while
big fire
back.
trucks?
I believe that it's all on there. It's just at 55%. So certainly if a big fire truck comes due, we have to get supplement from the car rental fund because we are only at 55%. But I don't believe we have any, that may not be, there may be a piece of public works equipment that never got replaced.
The example is that
Yes, I'm sorry, that's right.
It has never been depreciated. If we bought a new one, we would appreciate it, but we're not buying new ones, so. That's probably about it. The fire truck's being depreciated. And one other thing besides the rental car supplement is we depreciate, we keep them beyond their life.
Yeah.
So they're actually depreciated beyond their life, which helps that some.
That's a factor on people carrying.
Yeah, we may put a 4-year life on a police car, but we'll keep it 5 or 6 years or something. Same thing on most of the trucks. Fire trucks, we're trying to run 20 years. Right. 15, I think, front line, 5, reserve, something like that, 20 years.
Yeah.
So that helps it as well. But to tell you the truth, we probably could have worked that up some through the years, but it's extremely expensive. And the way we're doing it now seems to work pretty well because it's only when we have a big piece of equipment coming in, which this year we got a fire truck, that we have to supplement much.
Well, I think too, when you're factoring to taking it out past that 4 or 5 year number, that increases that factor.
The only reason, and that's worked for years.
Yeah.
That's not about 20 or 25 years. Because on Tom Martin days, we started this with 55%.
Thank you.
What you're going to see now on page 119 and 120 is more details on your general fund revenues and then your general fund expenditures by departments. As Gary mentioned earlier, we have already scrutinized these, and if there have been any increases of size, we'll point out on the expenditures that the pay plan and the benefits are already factored into these numbers, so that accounts for most of the increases within the department budgets. One example, if you look at marketing and communications, that's Betsy's budget, 84%. You think, oh my gosh, that's a lot. Yeah, 84%. Well, it's really $10,000 we basically stripped her budget during the recession, and she needed about $4,000 to do some promotion of our events in some of the local newspapers. She needed, I believe it was about $4,500 to try to do some additional videos for our website and for our cable channel. And then it was $1,700 to try to do some additional work for our newsletter. And so it's not a lot of money. And another one I might point out is like emergency management, a 27% increase. Again, it's $10,000. That is to pay for the maintenance for our winds notification system and to pay for the CASA, the subscription fee, which is $7,500, yeah, $5,700, something
One
like
thing,
that.
I looked at the total reach, down at the bottom line there, where it's 38.6, 38 million. And, you know, at first glance, when you compare just 2013, 2014 to that number, it seems like a pretty steep thing. So I went back to the old budget, and we're just now hitting the number we had in 2008. So, I mean, that's, when you really put, that really put it in perspective. When I first glanced at that, I thought, okay, yeah, I was coming back. We've now, just now barely gotten what we normally would have been in 2009 if the recession hadn't hit. And here we're going 2015.
Beyond that, some of our expenses, we talked about mowing time.
Oh, yeah.
That more, but we still got catching up.
Yeah, I mean, but it's really, it's a testament to everybody there that we've been able to do this basically at 2008 levels, and everything that we've done, at less than 2008 levels.
And when we jump into that, you'll see that the changes to the baseline expenses is still very minimal. I mean, you'll see where the dollars are, and it goes into your salary, your benefits, and your rebates and things of that nature. The actual baseline changes are still quite minimal. Street maintenance is one other one that I'll point out. It was up like 19%. That we've been able to restore back $57,000 into the street overlay account. Obviously, we're going to hear the report on Saturday, but one of the things that's important is not losing ground on our street overlay, to keep our streets maintenance done and not allow that deterioration. So, and then we have the same kind of summaries on 122 and 123 for our water and wastewater revenues and expenses. And then we have a chart in on 124 that shows our current wastewater and water rates and our proposed water and wastewater rates. And so then beyond that, I won't go through all of those because I know we are running short on time, but in tab 2, if you're going to see a lot of the same information, and then we include some of the assumptions that we used on revenues. In tab 3, it's more detail on the water and wastewater, a lot of the same sheets, but again, more, you can see the assumptions we made on our revenues. You can see historical water and sewer rates there. In tab 4, that's where you see all of the other funds. In tab 5, Gary will cover our capital requests in detail. I might also point out in there, that is where you see the plan for our infrastructure, such as the street overlays. This year, normally there would be streets listed. This year, there are no streets listed because you're going to hear the report on Saturday on where they recommend we use those dollars most efficiently. But you will see a sidewalk plan, a street lighting plan, signal lighting plan, and so it's them looking forward to see how, where the most need is for the upcoming year. And then you'll also see details of the fleet fund, so you can see which pieces of equipment are due for replacement in the upcoming year, and you can see the details of those pieces of equipment that are due. In tab 6, that's the debt section. I will point out that the budget for the debt will include any proposed debt sales, but the schedules you'll have in here are only debt obligations that are currently outstanding. We won't update these until debt sales are actually authorized by you and the debt is actually issued. In tab 7, you have a detail of the personnel counts by fund, and you'll see in there that we had 379 budgeted positions for 2014. Our estimate as of the time this book was prepared is we actually had 374 hired, so we had 5 vacancies. And then the budgeted for 2015 is also 379. It's not the same 379. There was a reduction of 3 and there was an add of 3. We had said to you once before, as we added back positions, we would try to make sure we did that most efficiently. We had a clerk position that we have substituted to be able to add another public works field tech. So we've taken out a records clerk and we put in a field tech. We also had 2 positions in the golf course fund that we determined were more efficient to be hired through workforce. So we have removed the full-time funding for them, and their positions are being filled through the contract labor, through workforce. And then we were able to add back a police administrative secretary in the police department, the police chief. That's a position that got cut in the downturn. He's been without his administrative assistant for a number of years, and so we needed to add that back. And then we were able to restore one other public works field tech. Those are so the count is still the same, but I wanted to point out that there was 3 that went out and 3 that came in. So you can see that. And in that same tab 7, you will see our pay plan for all the positions within the city. You'll also see our health insurance. It's excerpts from our health insurance plan and what our employee insurance premiums are, if you wanted to see any details of our health benefits. And then in tab 8, that's our statistical section, and that's where my presentation will start in just a second. We do lots of comparisons to our neighboring cities so that you can see how our water rates, how our tax rates, how our sanitation fees, how everything compares to those around us. And so you can gives you a good judge of how we are using our dollars, I hope. In tab 9 is a lot of historical data on our water system. And then in tab 10 is our multi-year budget. And that is, again, is not something that we try to go through and project, huge inflationary increases. We try to make sure that we can fund all the capital needs, that we can provide for modest pay plans, that we can provide for the personnel that we need. But we also try to look at it and make sure that we can maintain a reasonable tax rate, and we try to look at that and see what is going to happen for our water rates in the next 5 years. And the most important thing is making sure we can incorporate all of our capital improvements plan and understand how that would impact our debt rates and things of that nature. So with that, I'll go into the presentation, but I didn't want to just jump into that without kind of doing a little background on the book.
Before we get there, we'll I have a couple of questions.
Uh-huh.
On the personnel panel, I know we've been, with facilities, and public works keep asking for their front help staff. Is there any way we could do a job share or something like that and give them some part-time help? I've talked to you a little bit about what I was faced with public works the other day. I don't know if that was just an anomaly that day or what it was, Gary, but it's just, whether not the part-time person or.
There's a supplemental program in there for $20,000, but it's a big part-time facility tech. We had funded, he's got a part-time secretary out there now.
Okay.
We think that's perfectly fine. But,
I agree.
Where we're really continuing to need people, as we try to address it some this year, is public works. Public works, and I'm talking about field techs.
Yeah.
I know you said that about the animal shelter, and we're going to address that, but it's what's most important. If occasionally somebody walks in the office and there's nobody there, you got one person that's upset. And
Yeah.
I can accept that. But if there's a water line broken or a pothole or whatever that affects lots of people, that's the most critical. Same thing with our police department and fire department. When 911 rings, we want police officers there, we want firefighters there. So I'd like those 3 areas. The police department, we've addressed some. The fire department, there's a recommendation for some overtime, additional overtime to run the squad. We'll talk about, run the squad, we'll talk about later. But there's all kinds of things that we could do, but that's really, in my mind, our priority for in the future is police officers, firefighters, and public works.
As it should be. I just heard their Hal and Kyle's comments when they come here for their budget advance, how, they had their people that got them trained and
You
also
got to
they.
sit through all the departments with us. You've been an
I-
eye-opening experience.
I understand, I was on the other side of that desk, just
But
not a
it's-
few months back.
There has to be some priority put on it, and
I agree with you.
that's where our emphasis is.
I'm just curious to see what your thought processes were on that.
As we get to the end of the day or Saturday, I'm going to lift up one other position to you. And we had a great 9/11 here tonight, and that is, when we had a crisis, who came to bail us out. And that's, there's some funds, I may ask you for another portion of a position to try to we have to be very judicious in that because employees are just starting, it's not just here, it's everywhere. Employees are killing us on expenses. And it's, I'm really the federal government's fault, it's not, but we got to be very careful with where we have employees.
I like a conservative viewpoint. I'm not criticizing by no means. I was just trying to listen to some of the concerns and, you know, there are times where, you know, one person, like you well know, can make a difference in somebody's life, but like you say, I'm much rather make a difference out there fixing that water line or, you know, out there on the EMS call or whatever. So I agree. I just want to get y'all's viewpoints on it.
I think people are more accustomed now to just accepting that you might go into an office and there's nobody there to greet you for a minute.
Mhm.
We shut our office down at lunch.
Mhm.
You know, we started that during the downtime. I don't think I had a single fuss about it.
I doubt you have.
But it's allowed us to operate through traffic, so that's, I'm not forgotten the animal control deal, but it's.
Oh, no, I didn't get upset by no
Oh, I
means.
know.
I was just
But
trying
it's-
to, I tried to put myself in the position of an average citizen walking in there, you know, whether or not they turn and walk out, you know? And we all know, we want, as y'all do a great job, we take care of our citizens, so that's all I was lifting up.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna try to move through this fast, because I think I am trying to behind schedule here, but, so stop me, please, if you have any questions on this. But looking at some of the statistics, our population has increased 5.97% in the last 10 years, from 50,750 to 53,780 now. We pointed out to you before, the drop in 2010 there was attributed to the new census. Our full-time employees, you can see that count. 2005, we were at 368. And in 2013, we were 368. In 2014, we were budgeted for 379, but our actual field was only 374 as of our last count because of the 5 vacancies. And then we're also requesting the 379 for the upcoming year, and I explained the differences there. If you look at our employees per capita, you can see I've given you two different numbers, the actual, because everybody else reported the numbers as of September 30th, so for consistency, we did as well, but I've also recalculated it using our budgeted 379 and the new population estimate of 53,780. But you can see our ratio of 1 employee for every 141 under the current 930 numbers and 1 for every 142 citizens under the proposed numbers is the highest ratio of citizens to employees of any city around. So you can see we're working with a very lean staff. If we were to try and meet the ratio that Grapevine has,
Wow.
we would need to add, we would need 698 employees to be equal to their ratio. And to be equal to Hurst's ratio, we would need 532 employees to have Hurst's rates. It's probably the echo.
That's Tennessee talking.
I told Gary, I said I'm gonna lay off the pain pills today, so I'm not saying anything stupid, but I mean,
You turned red,
anyway.
Bedford citizens. Sorry.
So 532 is the number for Hurst, or whoever they are. And so you can see, the point is, we obviously have very lean staff. Sales tax per capita, this is kind of interesting. Our numbers have certainly gotten better here. We have, from our 1 cent, we receive $156 of our 1 cent. That's comparing there to everybody else. Bedford is $99 for the 1 cent. And Hurst, 251, North Hills, 137. North Hills used to exceed Euless. Grapevine, 506. You can see they tripled all of the other cities. Colleyville, 133. So it's pretty amazing that we have outpaced North Hills at this point, and obviously we're outpacing Colleyville and Bedford as well, but nowhere near Grapevine. Looking at that in a monetary figure, you see we bring in from a 2 cent, $16 million. Colleyville brings in $5.9 million. Grapevine, $49 million from their sales tax. North Hills, $17 million, and Hurst, $18 million, and Bedford, $9 million, $6. So.
That, for those of you who've been around a while, you know that is a humongous improvement from where we used to be. And if you think about stuff we've got going on right now, I was just, right before I came down here a while ago, I was looking at the latest submission of a project that had grown out of 500,000 square feet of retail
shows our net bonded general obligation debt. I want to point out that in the CAFR this past year, there was a requirement that we include all of our GO debt, even if it is self-supporting. So we have included that in the same manner for this slide for consistency. But I also included that bottom line to show you the self-supported debt excluded, because that's the way it's been presented to you in the past. I didn't want someone to think our debt had gone up. It has not. It's simply the way it's being reported now. So including all GO debt, our ratio is $741 per capita. That is clearly below the average of $1,657. You can see Colleyville has the lowest debt at $334. Grapevine has the highest at $3,323. North Hills, $2,548. Hurst, $1,228. Bedford, $853. Then down there for us, and I just showed that for comparison purposes, if you exclude the self-supporting debt, which is our golf course, softball, rolling dog, Pepper Star Center, then that's $466 per capita. And so you can see that our debt levels are very low compared to some of our neighboring cities.
How did Golly go in so low?
I don't know if that's just a factor of not having built or done a lot of capital improvements. I'm trying to think of anything that they did.
Health facilities, fire station, city hall, pretty new. I don't know.
That's all they've got right now, Shelley. Okay, and then we start with the water and wastewater fund. That may seem a little odd, but because the water and wastewater fund pays a 5% franchise fee to the general fund and a 5% G&A charge to the general fund, if you make changes to the water and wastewater fund, it impacts the revenue of the general fund. So we try to start there so you can put that to rest before we move into the general fund.
What was the G&A?
G&A is a general and administrative charge. It's basically an overhead charge of 5% that's paid to the general fund, and that's been paid for many years. And then there's a 5% franchise fee, and that's paid by all of the utilities to the general fund, and that's basically for use of right-of-way and the right to operate within the city. And so we charge ourselves that same in half for many years as well. So the 2014 operating revenues were $20,820,949. We actually show a decrease of $325,000 in water service, which looks odd because obviously we were proposing a rate increase as you've seen in your book. That's because the consumption levels are down. And Ms. Jackie over here does a tremendous amount of work on that. And so she has done her revenue estimates based on her revised consumption numbers. Our consumption for this year is not meeting what was projected, and therefore we have revised those consumption estimates down.
Why is it? Why is it down?
It's going to be a combination of your, the water conservation efforts that we've had in place. You've got your reclaimed water that's going to go up because you have some reclaimed water usage. But a lot of it's going to be attributed.
We've had some rain, even though it hasn't been recharging all of our reservoirs.
Yeah, and there's a lot of articles out there right now on that very topic. Most cities are experiencing that, and it is, there's the education, conservation education is beginning to take effect. People are beginning to recognize it. The increased rates, and in our case, the tiered rates, is waking lots of people up. But it's just the reclaimed water is taking some of the pressure off. What are we at, like 8% or 7%?
It's sort of offset one another.
Yeah, so it's a combination of things, but most any city you read about is facing that, particularly in our area, is facing that very thing. Is people using less water, but it's costing more to get it. And then there's basic costs in that water system, and when you spread that over lesser gallons, it drives the cost per gallon up.
This won't be the last of this either, though.
Yeah, we've got slides in here that are going to
We're
clearly show
talking
you
about
that.
that, this is nowhere near it.
Okay.
Does wastewater service the processing fees of getting rid of the wastewater?
Yes, TRA, Trinity River Authority, treats our wastewater, and they charge us a per thousand rate for that. And there is an increase to that as well. And so the volume on that stayed fairly consistent. And the rate is, we're proposing that the rate has to increase there as well. So that's the additional revenue is coming from a proposed rate increase there as well. And I'll go through those rate increases in just a second. Reclaimed water service also has, that is both a volume increase and a rate increase attributing to that revenue. Interest income down slightly, and then sanitation penalties and recycling is up just slightly. So our overall increase in revenue here is only 1.04%. And then we are proposing a drawdown of reserves, and you'll see that on the next slide between what is carryover and what's new request. This chart just breaks down our revenue into a pie so you can see it, and clearly 93% of our revenue is coming basically from our water and wastewater sales. We get a small amount from recycle, the sanitation, reclaimed water penalties, and then the other is inspection fees, meter fees, things of that nature. On the expenditure side, again, our increase in our overall budget is 1.2%. You can see the salaries and benefits are $129,000 combined. We have a reduction in our expected payment to TRA that is also going to be related to the reduction that Jackie is calculating for the consumption. The reclaimed water charges are going to go up slightly by $36,000. Transfers, as we said, that's $13,000 there. That's based on the fee that's paid. Actually, I'm just confusing myself. The next line, G&A and franchise fees going up $21,000. We talked about that. Professional and technical, that's $73,700. $50,000 of that is basically the payment to CWD for the recycling. That's for people who have elected the carts and the bins, and that's getting our budget adjusted to the revenue is obviously coming in. We've got to pay them the expenditure for that. Utilities are up pretty significantly there, $132,000 for our estimate of utilities, and then everything else is $1,200. So, and I believe up there in that professional technical, there was maybe $20,000 requested in one of the departments for mechanical maintenance, additional dollars that they needed. So there's very few other baseline expenditures. The capital carryover was $208,000, and then the requests in there that you'll see in tab 5 that Gary will take you through is $629,000, all to be paid for with excess fund balance if you approve it. And then breaking those expenditures down by the departments, you can see water production accounts for 33% of the budget, wastewater treatment 20%, and distribution 4%. Non-departmental, that includes your debt service, that includes your utilities, the service center operation, and then the capital, that represents the $1 million that you transfer annually to upgrade the water and wastewater lines and keep those up to date, and also represents $158,000 worth of depreciation on our meters that are in the ground. And then, of course, you got the finance, which is the utility billing, and then the GIS, which is your information services.
Well, the meter's at 55.
The meters are not at 55. That number was taken, I believe that is at 100% based on a 30-year life, or is it 40-year life? I think it's, I can't remember if it's 30-year life or 40, I think it's 30-year life. But we didn't start that until a few years back, so we don't have enough money accumulated. Obviously, that's why we're having to do a bond sale for the upcoming week. We did not start that meter depreciation until maybe, I think maybe 5-7 years ago that we were able to get that started. And then this is a graph by type, and you can see that the water and wastewater cost to TRA is 47% of the budget. The G&A charges and franchise fee are 10%, utilities 5%, the replacement of the infrastructure is 5%, service center 6%, personnel 20%, and everything else in the budget is 7%. So we said to you before, when we go making cuts, there's just really not that many areas that you can cut, because you see those other items are pretty much a fix unless you impact personnel.
I think it's amazing that personnel's only 20%.
In this budget, because your TRA cost is obviously paying TRA for the water and for the wastewater treatment is the majority of that budget. This is the slide that I want to get into a little bit about how TRA works for particularly Mr. Price and Mr. Tompkins. TRA basically operates like a co-op. They have the cost to operate the system, and those fees, those costs are paid directly by the user cities on a pro rata basis. And so what they do each year at the beginning of the year is they project what the water rate is going to be based on their projected cost and the projected take of each of the cities. And then they do a settle up the following year in May, and if per 1,000 gallons. And then they look at how much we took individually and how much we paid for, and they give us a bill or they give us a refund. So if they have overcharged us, they send us a check. If they've undercharged us, they send us a bill. That all happens the following May. Well, obviously, we can't go back and back bill our citizens for the water that they used last year. So we have to set our rate based on what TRA has projected. And then, the following May, we find out if it was right or wrong. Typically, what we have seen here for the last few years is they have been under projecting the cost. You can see there in 2006, they told us it was gonna cost $1.83. It only cost $1.72, so we had a little liberty that year. But then you look at the next year, they told us it was gonna cost $2 for the water. We ended up having to pay $2.38 for the water. So there was a huge differential. And then each year thereafter, you see that yellow line represents the actual. That there in 2013, they thought the water was gonna cost us $2.51 a 1,000 gallons. It was actually $2.88 when the settlement came. So there, now you can see out there for 2015, they are predicting that the rate for 2015 will be $2.91. So you can see that is a 27-cent increase per 1,000 gallons just for our cost to purchase the water from TRA.
And we don't know the 264, I'm gonna make the bold assumption here that we come in closer to $3.
The 264, we won't know that number till next May. So,
Because usage is down.
so
It
if,
makes sense.
this is one of the reasons why with that rate stabilization, if we were to get a bill, we could go into the rate stabilization fund and pay that bill. And then if we get a refund, we can deposit that money into the rate stabilization and then try to give some money back to the citizens. We've actually been able, because of the accumulated money, even though we've actually had to pay more, we've still been able to give some rebate back the last few years, even though our cost has actually been increasing. But, you know, obviously if that were to continue, then there would be a time at which point we might not be able to afford the rebate any longer.
I want you to think that TRA does a bad budget. It is just, there is no way to predict when it's rain going to get. If we get a lot of rain during the summer, you don't water your yard as much. And that's when the bulk of the water is used, is in the summer. So they're not bad people, they're not bad budgeters. That is just a humongous operation that they have. And there's a few variables that they can't control, one of which is heat and rain, two of which is heat and rain. And so this is historically been the way it is, and the fact of the matter is, it's always the way it will be. And you asked a question earlier, perhaps about the rate stabilization. Our effort was, in a perfect world, you would really set your rates in arrears, because it's only that next year that you know what you paid the year before. We can't do that, so our effort was to do this rate stabilization, where you could at least smooth it. When we did that, there was a little bit of a fluctuation. Well, now, as you can see right there, it's a pretty steep curve. And so there will not be any, there's no decreases on the horizon. TRA buys their water from TRWD, Tarrant Regional Water District. The cost of raw water is going up. And when we fuss about our employee costs and our healthcare costs, bear in mind, they got the same thing. So that's water is just going to continue to go up. Federal regulations is driving the cost of water up.
Yeah, I mean,
And scarcity.
It's probably a little late in the game to be looking at it, but I think our 291 rate, I think we're fooling ourselves. I think we're gonna be $3 this year, and I'll bet you we're $3.10 when all is said and done following May.
But if next year, this would sound goofy, but if next year it is hot and dry,
Then
you
the
can
cost-
very easily
Yeah.
make that up.
Yeah.
And if you don't, we've got the rate stabilization.
Yeah.
So,
Wastewater has been pretty much the same song, second verse. The cost has obviously been outpacing their estimates, not by a lot, but by a little bit each year. You can see in that last column, 223, they are, I'm going to round this to 11 cents. The actual increase by then is 10.2 cents. But in the slides here, you'll see an 11-cent increase, and that's their cost to us. That's how much they're going up on what they're charging us to treat the water based on their projection.
one of our discussion topics Saturday, by the way, is going to be on our water wells. So there's a major expense that we're proposing on our wells. So we'll try to address all that with Saturday.
So what does all that mean? It means that what we're recommending is an increase of 50 cents on our base fee, $8.45 to $8.95, and we're recommending 30 cents across each tier. You'll see what that means on our tiered rates. On the wastewater side, we're proposing a 50-cent increase in our base charge, and we're proposing a 14-cent in our volume charge. As we said up top, of the 30 cent on the tiers, 27 of that is directly related to the cost of water purchases. So there's 3 cents there basically for the city. And then on the bottom, you've got the 50-cent base charge plus there's a 14-cent increase overall, of which basically 11 cents of that is going for the wastewater treatment charge. And then what we're recommending on rate stabilization though is because we do have a balance in the rate stabilization that's fairly significant, we believe we can afford to get a rate stabilization rebate of 32 cents. So that will actually go up 7 cents, and that will help to offset that big increase that we've got on the water side, and will help just a little bit on the wastewater side. So, again, it's only guaranteed for 1 year, but it does at least help. As Gary said, in the past, you used to see the ebb and flow where you'd have a year that they over-projected and a year they under-projected, and so the thought was that the rate stabilization would kind of balance that out. Now it's kind of been a constant trend up, but at least this does help to defer that charge.
Well, something else with the population growing the way it is, even if we have continued rain, eventually the demand is going to cause the cost to go up regardless. So, yeah, it's not going to affect.
I read an article the other day that said, when gasoline goes up 20 cents a gallon, we may grumble, but we still stop to fill out. Well, if water goes up 20 cents per 1,000
gallons.
There's lots of conflict.
And you still, if you look at what our number is, basically, we're going to be in the, $5.50 to $6 per 1,000 gallons.
I think that's fair. If you look at it, depends on where you're at.
That's only if you're using.
If you're over the 35,000.
I'm talking about counting the whole thing combined.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got some slides up here for some comparisons, but we're proposing the same 30 cents that flow through the irrigation rates. We're proposing the same 30 cents flow through our fixed charges for commercial and multifamily and gas well meters. And then our base charge, the increase on the other size meters would be the equivalent. It's a 5.9% increase. That's the equivalent of the 50-cent base charge on a residential meter. But some other commercial customers have larger meters, so theirs ends up being a 5.9% increase.
Can we go back, can we look at the construction meters, if we increase that by a few more cents to offset some of the other costs, is that a novel factor that we use, or is it variable, just fluctuates?
We don't sell enough of it to.
Even where we.
No, you can put it wherever you want it. But
Because,
it's not, we don't sell enough of it to mess with. When we were selling water for gas exploration, it had some impact, but.
now it's just smarter.
It's not gonna make
Okay.
a few $1,000 difference.
What is, I know on our, especially with irrigation, your tiered rates really affect irrigation. How are we charging commercial?
Commercial's flat, except unless they have an irrigation meter, in which case they're charged irrigation rates. So they're.
But in fact, I was actually looking for that on this, and I really couldn't find something that said a commercial irrigation meter is charged what?
Irrigation meter is an irrigation meter.
Okay, so it
if you have an
doesn't same as
irrigation meter,
residential.
it's on a tier.
Okay.
If you have just a regular commercial meter, it's charged a commercial rate.
See, but it's charged, okay, so it's charged the commercial multifamily of $393, $423?
Right.
Okay.
But their irrigation meters revert up to the tier rates.
And that's where their water.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to get at. So we're charging commercial tiered rates
For irrigation?
for irrigation. But see, that's where I have an issue with the logic behind that, because you've got some commercial properties, you might have one commercial property, it's got 1 meter. You might have another one that's got 4 meters for irrigation. If they use the same amount of water, the guy with 1 meter is paying a ton more than the guy with 4 meters. There's got to be some way to make that equitable.
Well, if he only has the 1 meter and he's using it for irrigation, he's paying wastewater charges on it.
No, I'm talking about he has 1 irrigation meter.
Uh-huh.
Like, for example, I've got 2 irrigation meters for my property, a little property. Why we set it that way? I've got some properties where I've got 5 irrigation meters. If that city was on tiered rates, compared to the guy that when it was built, they hooked it up with 1 meter, I'm going to be paying a ton more.
Well, I don't know that it would be significant, because you're only getting a break on the first 35,000, but I'm not sure that they're not combining all those meters on one account, and you're not.
Well, that's what I was asking, that's what I would suggest we do.
Yeah, I think that that's what they're doing, but again, you know, that break that they would be getting would only be on the 35,000, but I think they have all those linked.
Well, that's true, you're
has
gonna
all
run more than
meters
35,000
linked.
on that side.
You got bases,
Yeah,
several, multiple bases, so
yeah.
And so then on our reclaimed water, the increase here is slightly different. We are trying to create a spread. Our goal is about a 15% spread between the potable and the non-potable water charges, and we are trying to get there over time. What those increases range, basically about 17 cents to 25 cents on the high end there. So you're seeing a 25-cent instead of a 30-cent increase on the reclaimed water charge. And again, our cost on the reclaim go up, but not nearly as much as the potable water goes up.
I think that's a question which I should have asked 6 years ago probably. Do we charge, you've got a commercial building with a sprinkler system, comes up through a riser room. Is that metered, or is that out of the fire line? I mean, where is that? Because I know I do have properties in Dallas-Fort Worth that I pay a monthly charge for a meter on my fire sprinkler system. And it runs me about $97 a month. But I don't pay that here, and I don't know, I've been to the property, I don't have a meter there. So is it running off our fire?
Why would it be metered? Because you're not really using it.
Well, you've got, same way you could have an irrigation meter, you shut off 6 months out of the year, you're still paying your base charge. Because you got it there, you have the availability.
But you don't run your, I thought you were talking about your fire sprinkler.
But it's the same concept. You've got a meter for that, because if you need it, you're gonna use it, and you pay a base meter charge for every other meter you have, even if you've never used the water. You know, you have water in vacant spaces, I'm still paying a base meter charge for that vacant space, even though I don't run any water to it.
I can double check your particular property, but I think what you're gonna find is it depends how it was designed. So is your building's fire riser coming off of your water service, or does it have its own
So
separate?
it has to be, it can't be on your domestic line.
Right, but it does it have its own separate, kind of a little bit going back a while ago, we were talking about multiple irrigation meters. Part of that is a function of hydraulically how it was
Right,
originally
yeah.
designed. But you're right, you don't typically have, if you have flow on that, you're either testing it or you haven't had a
Yeah.
fire.
But you do test them, and when you, every time you do construction, you drain your system, you fill your system, you drain your system, and you fill your system.
let
And,
us maybe know that if I.
I know, like Irving, for example, we do pay for it. Probably about 5 of my properties I do pay, the other 15 we don't have meters for it.
We'll have to check.
I was just keen to make a note of that.
We'll come back to that and see. This is one of the examples we said we would show you there of the historical water cost, 8,000 gallons. You can see in 2006, you would pay $29.65. You can see the number without the rebate this year would be $38.29. With the rebate would be $35.73. That's on the water side. On the wastewater side, back in '06, wastewater was only cost you $19.90. For 2015, it's up to $31.73. That's compared to $30.22 last year. Looking at this rate comparison to our neighboring cities, though, you can see we're actually still very competitive. At 3,000 gallons a user, this does not have the 32-cent rebate in it. This is just our full rate. So when you're looking at that, and that's also their current rate. So there's no reason to believe that they're not going to experience the same rate increases we're experiencing from TRA or their wholesale provider. So I would think they would be raising their rates. But this comparison is our proposed rate to their current rate, excluding our 32-cent rebate. So you can see on water, you would pay $18.79 compared to an average of $19.26. If you go up there to 8,000 gallons, it's $38 compared to $41. If you go up and start looking into the details, you can see that Grapevine and Colleyville are slightly lower, or are lower. Grapevine a little bit, not just slightly necessarily, they're a pretty good bit lower. You're going to see they have higher wastewater charges. Bedford, they actually get their money on the low end, which is a little counter to our philosophy of our tiered rates of charging more at the higher levels. So they get their money from the lower volume customers, and we get our money, obviously, we charge more the more you use. If you go to the wastewater slide, you can see across the bottom there, our rates cap at the 47.71 because we cap our usage at 90% of 14,000 gallons, which is 12,000 gallons. And so you can see we're very competitive at that top level of 20,000 gallons. We're kind of middle of the pack there. We have a slide that kind of brings this all together for you in a minute that you'll see. This is our combined rates compared to the other city at 8,000 gallons for water and wastewater. You can see without our rebate, we're at $70.02. With our rebate, we're at $67.46, which is actually less than any other of the cities, our surrounding cities. And again, that's at their current rates. So you can see our overall rates are still
Well,
very
rather
competitive.
too, I mean, there's several cities too that are officially lower, but they don't charge for the first 2,000 gallons.
That's built in this. That's built into this, that these
Okay.
numbers, we have factored that in for those who give the first 2,000 gallons, so.
Is
this should
8,000
be-
pound the average usage? or-
That's what's considered to be an average user. Some people would take exception to that, probably you and I, if you have a larger lot, would say that's not a good average. Jeremy probably thinks that's a fine average, so, it depends on different family patterns, but yes, that's considered an
How
average
many
user.
kids you got, size of the lot, that makes a difference.
If I go to the next slide, sanitation or recycles, obviously on the water bill, so we compare those to other cities as well. You can see our current rate is $8.48 for sanitation, we're $1.19 for recycle. You can see that is very, very competitive with all the other cities, with Bedford and Hurst being slightly lower on sanitation, they're higher on recycle, and all the other cities are significantly higher. We take this slide, show you the drainage fee. Colleyville was lower on their water and wastewater, but they have the highest drainage fee. They're at $7. We have the lowest drainage fee at $2.50 compared to all the other cities. And then putting all of the whole water bill together, and this is again based on 8,000 gallons doing water, wastewater, drainage, sanitation, and recycle. And in this scenario, we have included the rate that we'll be charging for sanitation and recycle in March of 15 when the companies have their contractual increase. And that will go to $8.73 and $1.22. So using the worst case scenario here, we've included that. Our bill for 8,000 gallons at our proposed rate would be $82.47, and that is still cheaper than every city up there is currently charging for 8,000
And that's on
gallons.
their current rate.
And that's on their current rates.
What, I understand drainage, I understand what wastewater is, but why would there be a fee for drainage?
Every household is charged a $2.50 drainage fee, and that money goes to maintain all of our drainage channels throughout the city. The project at Morrisdale was paid for by the drainage fee, and then commercial buildings are also levied a drainage fee.
And what that is basically is your non-permeable surfaces, every raw water that lands on there is going to a storm sewer. And so you pay a percent, a dollar for that. And again, it's all over the board around Dallas-Fort Worth. We're one of the cheapest ones around. I've got properties that were paid $2,600 a month drainage fee. Yeah.
This slide is the one Gary mentioned earlier, the raw water cost. The raw water that TRA gets comes from TRWD. TRWD has projected their raw water cost out to 2024. They're saying it will go from $1.09 in 2015 to $1.71. So over a 10-year period, they're projecting the raw water cost will go up 62 cents or 57%. In
Is
the
that
10-year
including
period.
an additional storage capabilities too, or is that not including additional storage?
I can't tell you what they've got into their.
If they
this
have
is-
storage built in, which they don't in this period, it would be included. It's
Wow.
whatever, if they decide, this is kind of like an actuary. The most certain thing about it is it's wrong. And that's, y'all that have been around a long time have known TRA rates have never been high as they project. So you can't believe this either. And I don't think they're not lying about it, but if there's a push next year to build a new reservoir, that's, hundreds of millions of dollars that'll get cranked into this.
Exactly.
So that's, all we can do is accept what they tell us.
Exactly.
Same thing, TRA.
Now, TRA gets their raw water from TRWD, and this is what TRA is projecting. They just give us a 5-year projection. But we went in and put 2014 in there so you could see the cost. You can see their projection for 2015 at $2.91. They're saying by 2019, the cost is going to be $3.52 per 1,000 gallons. So you can see they are projecting next year 18 cents, 24 cents in 17, 6 cents in 18, and 13 cents in 19. So there is no relief in sight to, be able to say to you, if we do this rate increase this year, next year we don't have to, it's just not possible. I mean, we're sitting here looking at them going up 88 cents in a 5-year period. That's 33% in a 5-year period based on their projections. So,
And we know this will be low.
and those probably will be low. And then on the wastewater side is the exact same story. They've got their current year increase that we said at 11 cents. They're predicting 19 cents for next year, or 16, 20 cents for 17, 15 cents for 18, and 13 cents for 19. So that's a 77-cent increase on the wastewater side. That's 36% increase in a 5-year period. So if you take and add those numbers together, you can see we're looking at 20 to 40 cent increases in total from our wholesale provider every year, pretty much for the next 5 years. So there's just, the moral of that story is this will not end here.
Yeah, I
So,
agree.
and with that, just to kind of summarize, we basically only have a little over 1% change in our proposed budget. It is predicated on you approving those rates of 50-cent increases to the basis and the 30 cents on the tiers. It includes the salary package for the employees, which is at 3.25%, and it includes the water costs that CRA is projecting. So before we go any further, any questions on water wastewater?
And we're still lower than every other city with our new rates compared to the current rates.
Well, our overall, I'd be careful about it. We're just lower, but our overall water bill is lower.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But, we always hate to recommend a base rate increase, but I don't know that we have any choice. The good news is, if Jackie is right, there's not another one. What's the next base rate?
I think it's 4 years.
4 years. So it's, hopefully we can maintain that. Without a doubt, from what you just saw on those slopes of the water and wastewater, the rate will continue to go up. But it's, if we can hold the base rate. But quite honestly, the base rate is where we get the certainty of the revenue to pay the employees. That, when Loretta made a statement a while ago, it said something about there's 3 cents for the city. Well, the 3 cents for the city is, that goes towards that $26,000 increased salaries and whatever it was in benefits. That's where that's going.
And goes for all the infrastructure
Yeah.
improvements that we do.
There's very little increase for our own expenses, but you will continue to see that, the rates going up. And probably they will actually go up at a steeper slope, because there's no doubt both from affordability and just people becoming wiser, they're going to use less water, which is part of our effort
I agree.
to control that water use.
So that was my question, is what do we get with the base rate? Because it's always the first thing listed on a water bill, and I don't know.
It's basically
I'm not
the fee
an
for
Atmos
maintaining
Energy
the
fan,
account.
but when Atmos went from $7 now to $19.
It's like the T&D charge on your electric bill.
Right.
That goes to Encore. That is to maintain the lines, the transformers, and then your usage rate goes to whatever your retail provider is. Same thing on your water. In theory, the base rate goes to pay for our lines and our own infrastructure, and then the water, the actual rate is for the water that you use.
So I guess in my mind, we wouldn't be able to take the 50 cents of the base rate and put it on the drainage fee up to $3. We wouldn't be able to make that.
No, because it's not, it really goes, it goes back to your fund-based accounting. The drainage should be used for drainage, and the water should be used for water. Years and years ago, we kind of blurred the lines, but in the last 5 or 6 years, or 7 or 8 or 9, we've tried to true that up. And it is only water employees do water work, drainage employees do drainage work for the most part. There might be a little blurring line on the streets, but our water accounts
one thing that our city can take great pride in is the infrastructure for our waters, streets, utilities. And the nation is deteriorating, bridges, roads, and everything else. But we are doing good.
We really are, but when you see Hal give his quarterly wastewater reports particularly, and you see the number of calls that they have, used to, we had a ton of calls. I mean, it was not unusual to have 2 or 3 years where we actually backed sewer up into somebody's house. And, it could happen tonight, but for the most part, we don't have those anymore. And if we do, it's a mechanical issue. It's not a failure of our drain, of our storm.
What do you mean
sanitary
mechanical
system.
issue?
Pardon?
What's that mean, mechanical issue?
If occasionally, if we're using our back truck to clear a line, if there's a combination of things happen where the plug is one place and you got a house between where you're putting that pressure in there to blow it out, occasionally we will blow sewage into a house.
Or lift
Correct,
station.
but used to, if it rained in certain parts of our city, you would get infiltrate in there and it would back up. It just grows away into the house.
I've heard of that in other cities. Are we, do we believe we're liable for that when if there are times that happens? Are we responsible to fix that person's home or?
Well, I'll give you 2 answers. The legal answer is no. We have sovereign immunity. Unless we're using a motorized piece of equipment. If we're using our back truck and we back it up in your house, there is no doubt we're liable. But the situation where you have rain and it backs it up, we're technically not liable. We have always taken responsibility for it and paid for it. We now have insurance coverage to cover that through Texas Injury Risk, because we believe that we have responsibility. You'll see on the news occasionally where there's a water line break and it floods the house, and the city will say, we're not.
Yeah, I know people have had that in other cities.
I guess I better be careful about saying we would never do that because technically we have immunity, but we have taken responsibility on everyone that I've ever been aware of.
I think that's great.
And sometimes it is honestly big bucks.
Yeah.
But it is, on the sewage side, there is nothing more gross. Billy Owens, who we all know, he had it in his house about a foot deep.
Oh, man.
And I cannot tell you how gross that was. It happens, it could happen tonight, but the infrastructure improvements we've made has got it to the point where it is, we don't really have it unless it's our fault.
And PRA, though, we got on to Wilshire.
Wilshire is the one place that we're still hanging out, that just that one little section of
Yes.
Wilshire.
Yes.
But even with that,
It's not as bad as it was.
no, I mean, we did some things that, it's still gross, but it ain't on your house, if you go outside. But,
Yeah.
occasionally.
He occasionally gets some of it in his bathtub, but,
But isn't there a way to put a backflow preventer in there?
that's what they did.
Everybody that we know that is at risk that has allowed us to put a backflow preventer, we've done it. But that's a stopgap measure
Yeah.
for,
At best.
we need TRA to do that. And they're doing that pretty quickly.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
So, but that's the last place we have.
They're
a
supposed to be
problem.
doing that in November, aren't they?
Something like that.
It's pretty close to that number. You remember Bill Smith last time was here, did all of that?
Yeah, I write a lot down. Those are the phone calls I constantly get, those,
But you know, I mean,
yeah.
all those things are kind of gross, and you think, well, they shouldn't happen, but the fact of the matter is, we've got millions of gallons of sewage flowing every day, and stuff happens.
It does.
It just happens. But Ms. Porterfield pointed out, we are richly blessed to have been able to get, not just keep up, but get ahead of that game.
All that pipe bursting we've been doing.
But that's that $1 million a year that